This is Constatin Stanislavsky. He was a Russian director. He pioneered a psychological approach to theater in the 1920s and 30s. Imitating human behavior and making it feel realistic to human audiences is very complicated. We all see human behavior every day of our lives. We're all naturally very perceptive to human behavior. When you try to imitate realistic behavior, every single thing that people can see you do either adds to or detracts from the believability of your performance. That includes your tones of voice, facial expressions, hand gestures, posture, and everything else you do. If some of them are realistic but others aren't, your audience will feel like your performance wasn't very realistic, even if they can't say why. So Stanislavsky tried to find unifying concepts behind everything people do in real life. He discovered two rules. First, every action people take is an attempt to achieve a goal, or no one ever does anything for no reason. Second, people always try to use their energy as efficiently as they can to achieve their goals. Evolutionary psychologists have discovered that all human behavior is the attempt by the individual to preserve the survival rates of his or her genes by the most effective means perceivable to him or her. Stanislavsky only missed the part about the genes. Preserving the genes is always the goal. Neither did he have any way of knowing much about how evolution created our brains. Also, a lot has been discovered about consciousness and subconsciousness since then. Emotions and intellect aren't two separate things, like a lot of people have believed. Emotions are general ideas, which are mainly subconscious. Intellect is the ability to focus your mind on specific ideas. Consciousness is the stuff you know you're thinking about. Subconsciousness is the stuff you don't realize you're thinking about. But Stanislavsky did figure out that there's a structure to human decision-making, and that the results depend on how energy flows through that structure. The best theater artists are exceptionally perceptive of human behavior, and combined with these two principles, that has been enough for them to make fictional movies about realistic people. Artists have used this to make movies about huge events like the course of a person's life or the fates of nations. All those huge things turn out the way they do because of people making whatever they feel to be the best decisions every step of the way. One good test of the Stanislavsky method is that artists have used it to produce plays that were written before he discovered it, and they get the same results. The Stanislavsky method works really well in Shakespearean theater. Stanislavsky's goal was to figure out what great playwrights were doing intuitively. Knowing this stuff intuitively worked well for playwrights because they worked alone. But for a bunch of people to work together to create fictional human behavior, which is what a theater company is, they have to be able to talk to each other about what they're trying to do. A lot of evolutionary psychologists have heard of the Stanislavsky method and talk about it in their books, but there's a lot more to it than I've seen in any books about evo-psych. Since using it depends on so much intuition, you can't really learn how it works in a few hours. It takes a career in theater, which I've had. The first book I ever read about evolutionary psychology was Why God Won't Go Away by Andrew Newberg and Eugene Dachille, a couple of neurologists. They outline how people have a basic structure of decision-making and how that led to religion. Humans have two basic instincts and three basic mental abilities. The instincts are survival and reproduction. The mental abilities are the abilities to imagine, to remember, and to communicate ideas with other members of our species. If you were walking through a forest and you knew that bears lived there, you would be alert for bears and for any indications of bears. You would perceive them to be a threat to your survival and reproduction. You know that bears are a threat to you either because you can remember seeing what a bear did to someone else, or because you've heard from someone else what bears do to people, and you can imagine what a bear would do to you. So you bring weapons, and you travel with friends, and you try to avoid the parts of the forest where the bears live. Once you imagine a problem, you start trying to imagine a solution. Religion is that on a much bigger scale. Our intelligence gives us the ability to recognize patterns the length of our entire lifetimes. That lets us make much bigger plans than any other animals. But it also makes us the only species that can recognize that every pattern leads to our deaths in the end. That leads to a serious conflict in people's perceptions of the world. We feel that surviving is one of the two most important things we can do in life, but our intelligence makes us realize that no matter what we do, sooner or later, we're going to fail at it. All religions resolve this problem one way or another. Every religion is a set of ideas about what's supposed to happen in a world where everyone is guaranteed to die. That's more obvious in some religions than others. Some religions offer their followers a direct escape route from death. Other religions are built up around ways of preparing yourself mentally to meet your end. But one way or another, your death reconnects you to the powerful thing that makes stuff happen in the universe. I could see that was a good start at a connection to the Stanislavsky method. If all human behavior is the result of our using three basic abilities to try to satisfy two instincts, then that is a structure of human decision-making. But you need something more specific to be able to make movies about people making decisions. In my small business management class years before, we learned about a list called the 5 Human Motivators. In my flight instructor certification training, I learned about the Maslow hierarchy of human needs. Combined, they make a list of 7 items. I could see that religions add one more. I figured that must be everything now, because if there was anything else people felt was important in life, between education, advertising, and religion, somebody would have thought of it by now. Survival is the direct motivation by the survival instinct to avoid certain death. Safety is a less direct form of the survival instinct to avoid danger that isn't life-threatening. Reproduction is the direct motivation by the reproduction instinct, which leads to everything involved in attracting mates, having sex, having children, and raising families. Social is the motivation to be a member of a group, to make friends, to be respected by people, and to be able to cooperate with people. Self-gratification is the desire for good feelings. Over the course of our evolution, good feelings were the signal that our ancestors were satisfying their instincts. But now this has become a motivation unto itself, because people have found lots of ways to trigger good feelings that don't have anything to do with satisfying instincts. You can eat a lot of candy, or you can snort a lot of cocaine and make yourself feel good that way, even though you're doing more harm to yourself than good. Self-actualization is the desire to use your abilities. Our ancestors had to use their abilities to survive and reproduce, so now we feel like we're supposed to use our abilities. But that doesn't mean our survival and reproduction depend directly on the abilities we feel we should use. A professional ballerina with a broken foot would be a very unhappy person for the next couple of months, even if her insurance was paying her as a disabled worker in the meantime. Homosexuals are people who have discovered that they can satisfy most of their reproductive instincts with a member of the same gender and will feel like their lives are incomplete if they're not allowed to. Self-fulfillment is self-actualization taken a step further. This is the desire to use all of your abilities in order to make a life for yourself. Fulfillment of self-fulfillment takes that another step. This is the desire to use all of your abilities as much as you can to make the best life you can for yourself. This doesn't mean we're all workaholics. This is just the desire to feel satisfied with your life, which means to do whatever it takes to get satisfied with your life. A lot of things people do have multiple motivations. A man and a woman hooking up and having children could be motivated by all of these things. Reproduction is obvious. Survival and safety, if the two of them together were able to get a better standard of living than either of them had alone. Social, because it's two people forming a group. Self-gratification, because they feel good about it. And self-actualization, self-fulfillment, and fulfillment of self-fulfillment, if they both felt like they'd found the best partner they could find. Now this shows what people want. But we still need a way to see how people make their decisions to try to get what they want. That takes another list of 5 more items. These are abilities, skills, resources, personal history, and cultural background. All of these can be broken up into subcategories to get into finer detail. There are a lot of things that seem like they should be on this list, but those all turn out to be subcategories. Opportunities, for instance, are a type of resource. Liabilities are a negative resource, and so on. Abilities are any characteristics about a person that affect what they can do, other than changeable mental abilities. You make your decisions based on your perceptions of what you can do. For instance, I'm 6'3", so the top of my refrigerator looks like a convenient place to put things. People who are 5'3" don't agree with me. For another example, tall mountains look to me like fun things to climb. But if I had a broken leg, I wouldn't think of them that way. Skills are things you learn how to do. This overlaps with abilities a lot. Learning new things changes the decisions you make because it changes your perceptions of what you can do. Resources are anything external to yourself. This is what biologists talk about as the interaction between an animal and its environment. Usually, people think of resources as objects you can use, like clothes, food, tools, plants, animals, minerals, and the like. But it also includes things like time, man-made laws, scientific laws, and other people. If you're driving a car on a mountain road, you decide how fast to drive based on what the speed limit is, how much time you have to get to where you're going, how fast you can drive safely, and what will happen if you're late. Personal history is all the stuff that's happened to you in your life. Everything that happens to you changes your mental state. It can change the decisions you'll make. Things that have happened to you that don't relate to your situation directly can still affect your perception of the situation. For instance, people who have been abused as children often get uncomfortable when they hear people raise their voices. That even happens if they can see that you raised your voice at them because you were in a noisy room and you weren't threatening them. Then they'll seem to you to start acting strangely because they'll be reacting to a situation where they feel like they're going to be abused again, so they'll start trying to keep you from abusing them. To them, that seems like the right thing to do, but to you it won't make any sense because you weren't going to abuse them. Cultural background is the stuff you learn by association from other people. This is the most pervasive and least tangible form of learning. It affects your mental state and the decisions you make by connecting different ideas together, often without you realizing it. For instance, none of us saw how the universe began, but we all believe various things about it because of what we've learned from other people. And we've all developed various patterns of believing, or not believing, that the way the universe began affects the decisions we should make now. I call this the systems theory of human evolutionary behavior. There's no formal way to draw it as a systems diagram with all those little boxes and arrows connecting them, because there are so many ways our brains connect these. But all human behavior derives from these 18 factors. Some people don't do some of these things, like some people decide not to have children. But there are no decisions people make that are motivated by factors that aren't in this list. Any movie where the artists attempted and succeeded to create realistic human behavior is a systems diagram of this. What you see are some initial conditions and some characters, and then, based on what you know about the characters, they react realistically to those conditions and to each other's reactions. So what you see is a lot of complexity that feels to you like it all fits together somehow, even if you can't say how. The remake of Battlestar Galactica is the best example. That's a single storyline that's roughly 100 hours long. A lot of things happen in the story that don't happen in real life, but the actors reacted realistically to being in a situation where those things did happen. They started out in a situation where people knew how to build artificially intelligent robots and spaceships that could fly faster than light. Then they discovered that some other things were possible in the universe that they hadn't known about before, and they were surprised by that. But they adapted their decision-making to their changes in their understanding of their situation. It starts with the robots trying to exterminate the humans in a nuclear war. Then it's an epic adventure through space, where the heroes are trying to escape the robots and find a new planet to settle on. And there's conflicts of opinions among the people about what they should do. And there's romances and love affairs and love triangles and espionage and sabotage and mutiny and courage and heroism, and people sacrifice their lives to save their friends. And all of that happens by everyone involved making the best decisions they can think of every step of the way. That's what makes it look realistic.